being put on the spot with a master evaluator only makes it even more terrifying. But I'm going to give it everything that I can and see what we can do in these 5 to 7 minutes. One of the things that I want to make absolutely clear, my book does not endorse felicide. So if you're a cat lover, you can still read it. It's not actually saying that you should kill cats. It's not called How to Get Away with Killing a Cat. It's called How to Apologize for Killing a Cat. And the reason it's got that title is because apologizing is one of the most difficult persuasive things that we have to do in society. When we've done something wrong and we have to own up for it, and we have to explain to someone why we're sorry, we then start deploying rhetoric. So what is rhetoric, you might be asking yourself? Rhetoric is a bit like the theory behind speeches. So you guys, having done Speechcraft, probably have learned an awful lot about how speeches work. I understand you've looked at structure, and you might have looked at composition. So rhetoric is a bit like the tricks and the tropes that you're likely to use in order to make your language more effective. So for example, if you had a sentence and then you restructured that sentence so that your emphasis fell on a specific word, that will be an example of rhetoric. If you use some form of repetition, that could also be a use of rhetoric. Or if you simply bolstered your own credibility in front of your audience by talking about all of your achievements, that is also a use of rhetoric. So rhetoric can be how we present ourselves to the audience, but also how we use how we use our words. And Lisa rightly said, it's one of the oldest professions. It's actually the second oldest profession. There's one that's older, and you all know what that is, and I'm not going to talk about it. But speechwriting is the second oldest profession. And one of the things I find really fascinating about rhetoric is that it hasn't really changed much. If you think about it, I know we're on Zoom, but 2,000 years ago, when someone was giving a speech, you would have one person stood up in front of an audience speaking. Thousands of years have passed, literally. Huge industrial revolutions have happened. Society has changed in more ways than we can count. We've had the technological revolution. Yet what do we as human beings do? We automatically go back to the same situation we have before. We have one person stood in front of a group of people giving a speech in exactly the same way. And when we can't do that, we go to online. But I'm sure many of you would agree that in-person speeches have a different effect. So rhetoric's been around for thousands of years, but what's an actual example of rhetoric? So the three branches of rhetoric, the most common things that you'll hear people talking about are called ethos, logos, and pathos. Has anyone heard of these? You can give me a nod. You're like, yes, we are experienced Speechcraft people. This is week 6, we know everything. I'll give you a rundown just in case you missed it. So ethos is how you establish your credibility as a speaker. So whenever you're stood up and you're giving a speech in front of an audience, they will have a perception of you. You will then use your words to try and manipulate their perception of you so that they view you the way you want to be viewed. Sometimes you might want to come across as a sort of like thundering, powerful speaker who knows everything that they're talking about. And other times you might want to come across as being a little bit humble, a little bit modest, because it works in your advantage to come across that way. So whenever we're speaking, we have to ask ourselves, what is the most effective ethos for that audience and for that message that we're delivering? And I think it's very important that every single speech that we give has a very clear message and a very clear objective. Your message is, what is it that you want to say? Your objective is, what do you want to happen as a result of the speech? Odds are, if you don't have a message and you don't have an objective clearly defined, you're not going to give a very good speech. You're going to waffle. You're going to go on tangents. And that's when you lose an audience, because giving a speech is a really hard thing to do. Actually hooking an audience's attention and keeping it, even for 3 minutes, is incredibly challenging. And that's why when you're writing your speech, you need to properly scrutinize every single paragraph, every single sentence, every single word, and ask yourself, how does this help me meet my objective? How does this communicate my message? And if it doesn't, you need to think about getting rid of it, because it's just waffle. So that was a little bit of an introduction to ethos. Logos is simply when we use logic in our speech in order to make something more persuasive. Doesn't necessarily have to be true. I could tell you that actually 96% of the most successful speeches all use logos. The ones that don't are bad. I've just made that statistic up as an example, but that would be a use of logic. And one of the things that's really interesting, especially in the modern world of fake news, when Twitter, especially now that Elon Musk has taken over, spreads lies faster than we can extinguish them, logos is incredibly dangerous. And we have to think about how we use logos in our speeches, but in a way that makes us seem reasoned, calm, in control. The third one of those was pathos, which is our use of emotive language. So when we use pathos, we are trying to elicit an emotional response from our audience. Maybe it's humor, maybe it's sadness, and we use certain rhetorical features to do that. One of the most common rhetorical features that we have is called a tricolon. It's quite simply when you structure something into three. So these are all examples that I've used in my book because I like them. But the first one that I'm going to share with you is of Julius Caesar. He said, I came, I saw, I conquered. 1, 2, 3. And you think he could have said, yes, I went and I destroyed everything in my path. That wouldn't have been recorded in the annals of history. The reason that that quote is so powerful and well remembered is because he structured it into tricolon. Abraham Lincoln spoke of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Again, he could have said a government for everyone. But if he said a government for everyone, it wouldn't have been anywhere near as effective. If you go on the Walt Disney website, you will, or it used to be the case, I think they've updated it now, as Walt Disney Florida. The first thing that jumped up to you were something like 2 theme parks, 4 water parks, endless magic. So it's another tricolon. And my favorite example, if Mickey Mouse and Julius Caesar haven't convinced you, is from the British industrial giant that is Anne Summers. I'm sure some of you know them. You can see some very, some very happy looking ladies. Yes. So Anne Summers described their 7-inch vibrator as being smooth, sleek, and multi-purposeful. You got another tricolon in there. So tricolons don't only work in speeches, they also work in marketing. So if I said to you that I listened to a really good speech recently, it was dynamic, it was thought-provoking, and it made me question my view on tricolons. I've just said it was dynamic, whatever words I used. I used 3 words that mean essentially the same thing, and that's another rhetorical feature. It's called abundantia. So what I'm trying to get at in this, and I'm going to use my last 10 seconds to summarize, is rhetoric is huge. There's so much rhetoric out there. It's absolutely everywhere. It's such a fun and exciting world. And I think we should all engage with it a bit more because not only does it help us with our speeches, it's also really good fun. Thank you.